My name is Amber Wilson, I'm 28 years old, and I never thought my own sister would tell me to leave our family dinner. At the Ivy, of all places, where everyone could hear. Being the only adopted child in the Wilson family was never easy, but Stephanie's hostility had been building for years. Nothing prepared me for the moment she said, "Go find another table," her eyes cold as she slid the check toward me, a staggering $3,270. Before I dive into this heartbreaking story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that subscribe button, and join me as I share how I found strength after being rejected by my own blood. I was adopted when I was 3 years old. My earliest memory is sitting in a social worker's office clutching a small stuffed rabbit, the only possession I had from my birth parents. John and Margaret Wilson sat across from me, smiling warmly. Margaret had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. John had a deep, gentle voice that made me feel safe. They told me they wanted me to come live with them and be their daughter. I didn't fully understand what that meant at the time, but I knew I wanted to go with them. The Wilsons already had 2 biological children. Stephanie was 7 when they adopted me. She was a pretty little girl with blonde curls who barely acknowledged my existence during our first meeting. Michael was 5, a curious boy with freckles who immediately asked if I wanted to see his toy cars. I remember nodding eagerly, desperate for connection. Our home in suburban Chicago was spacious and warm. I had my own room painted soft yellow with butterfly stickers on the walls. Margaret had prepared it specially for my arrival. John would read me bedtime stories every night, different voices for each character. They enrolled me in the same private elementary school as Stephanie and Michael, dressed me in clothes just as nice as theirs, and included me in all family photos and activities. But Stephanie's resistance to my presence was apparent from the beginning. While my parents and Michael embraced me wholeheartedly, Stephanie maintained a polite but distant attitude that even a 3-year-old could sense. My 5th birthday was particularly revealing. Mom and Dad threw a princess-themed party in our backyard. I wore a sparkly purple dress and a plastic tiara. Michael helped me open my presents, genuinely excited for me. But when I unwrapped the beautiful porcelain doll my parents had given me, similar to one Stephanie cherished, I caught my sister's expression darkening. "She got a Jessica doll?" Stephanie had whispered loudly to our mother. "But those are special." "You said mine was special." Mom had tried to smooth it over. "Honey, we thought Amber would like one too. You can play dolls together now." "I don't want to play with her," Stephanie had replied, just loud enough for me to hear. "She's not even really your daughter." I pretended not to hear, but those words etched themselves into my heart. Despite this undercurrent, I spent years trying to win Stephanie's approval. I would offer to help with her homework, compliment her outfits, and even let her borrow my things without asking. Nothing worked. As we grew older, the gap between us only seemed to widen. My parents weren't blind to Stephanie's behavior, but they didn't always catch the subtle digs or cold shoulders. When they did witness direct unkindness, they would discipline Stephanie and remind her that I was her sister in every way that mattered. But they couldn't monitor every interaction, and Stephanie became skilled at concealing her true feelings around them. Michael and I, on the other hand, developed a genuine sibling bond. 2 years older than me, he became my protector at school, made sure I was included in neighborhood games, and often stood up to Stephanie when she excluded me. While not confrontational by nature, he would say things like, "Come on, Steph, don't be mean. Amber's our sister." As we moved into our teenage years, I found my own path. I discovered a passion for art and design, spending hours sketching room layouts and studying color theory. My parents nurtured this interest, enrolling me in special art classes and later helping me apply to prestigious design programs. I worked hard in school, eventually earning a scholarship to study interior design at Parsons School of Design in New York. Stephanie chose a different route, staying closer to home and studying business at Northwestern. She graduated with honors and quickly secured a position at a marketing firm in Chicago. Her life seemed to follow a conventional trajectory: career advancement, marriage to Ryan, her college boyfriend, at 26, and purchasing a home in an upscale Chicago suburb. I built my career in New York, working for a renowned design firm before eventually starting my own business at 26. My specialty in sustainable luxury interiors earned me features in several design magazines and a growing roster of wealthy clients. Despite the physical distance, I made consistent efforts to remain connected to my family, flying home for holidays and important events, sending thoughtful gifts, and calling my parents at least once a week. Throughout these years, Stephanie maintained her cool attitude toward me. During family gatherings, she would engage in conversation but rarely ask about my life or achievements. When my parents proudly shared news about my career milestones, Stephanie would quickly change the subject or offer a brief, dismissive "that's nice." Michael would sometimes catch my eye across the table, offering a sympathetic smile. What hurt most wasn't Stephanie's lack of sisterly warmth. I'd grown accustomed to that, but how her attitude influenced extended family perceptions. At Wilson family reunions, I often felt like an outsider, aware of curious glances and whispered conversations. Stephanie never explicitly told relatives I wasn't real family, but her behavior communicated volumes. Despite everything, I loved my adoptive parents deeply and was grateful for the life they had given me. John and Margaret Wilson had always treated me exactly the same as their biological children, providing the same opportunities, the same love, the same support. They were my real parents in every way that mattered, and I never doubted their love for me. 2 years ago, my parents decided to retire to Florida. After 40 years in Chicago, they were ready for warmer weather and a more relaxed lifestyle. They purchased a lovely home in a retirement community near Naples and quickly adapted to their new environment. While I missed having them closer, I was happy they were enjoying their well-deserved retirement. Their move, however, created a significant shift in our family dynamic. With our parents hundreds of miles away, the buffer between Stephanie and me was removed. Without realizing it, my parents had been the glue holding our fragile sibling relationship together, moderating tensions and ensuring family gatherings remained civil. Stephanie, now 32, seemed to appoint herself as the new family matriarch despite being entirely unsuited for the role. She began organizing family events, determining when and how we would all get together. These gatherings increasingly happened on her terms, at times that worked for her schedule, and typically at locations near her home in Chicago. Michael, now 30, had recently welcomed his first child with his wife Jessica. Between new parenthood and his demanding job as an engineer, he had less time and energy for family drama. Though he remained kind and supportive toward me, his ability to intervene in Stephanie's behavior was limited by his own life circumstances. Stephanie's hostility toward me became more pronounced after our parents' move. Without their moderating presence, she became bolder in her exclusion and dismissive comments. Last Thanksgiving, when we gathered at her house while our parents visited from Florida, she assigned me to eat at the kitchen counter with the children while everyone else sat at the formal dining table. When I quietly asked if another chair could be added to the main table, she replied that there just wasn't enough room, despite there clearly being space. "It's fine, Amber," she had said with a thin smile. "Someone needs to supervise the kids anyway. And it's not like you have your own children to worry about." I had swallowed my hurt and sat with my 7-year-old niece and 5-year-old nephew, trying to maintain a cheerful attitude for their sake while the adult conversation and laughter flowed from the dining room. Throughout these increasingly uncomfortable encounters, I tried to maintain peace. I told myself that family harmony was worth the occasional slight or hurt feelings. I reminded myself how much I loved my parents and didn't want to create situations that would force them to choose sides during their retirement years. About a year ago, I met Lucas, a kind and perceptive architect whose firm had collaborated with my interior design company. Our professional relationship quickly evolved into friendship and then romance. Lucas was the first person who truly noticed the pattern of how Stephanie treated me. After witnessing one of our family video calls where Stephanie had repeatedly talked over me and minimized my recent professional achievement, Lucas gently pointed out what he saw. "Amber, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but your sister seems to go out of her way to put you down," he had observed carefully. "Is it always like that between you two?" His question made me pause. Having grown up with Stephanie's behavior, I had normalized it to such an extent that I rarely questioned it anymore. Lucas's outside perspective forced me to examine the dynamic more objectively. She's always been that way, I admitted. Ever since I was adopted. That doesn't make it okay, Lucas replied. You deserve to be treated with respect, especially by family. Over the following months, Lucas encouraged me to establish healthier boundaries with Stephanie. These conversations created an internal conflict. I wanted to stand up for myself, but I also feared disrupting family peace. What if creating boundaries with Stephanie meant losing my connection to my parents or Michael? What if confrontation only made things worse? Despite my concerns, I began making small changes. I declined invitations to events that felt designed to diminish me. I redirected conversations when Stephanie attempted to talk over me. I corrected her when she accidentally gave out incorrect information about my life to relatives. These small assertions of self-respect didn't go unnoticed, and Stephanie's behavior became increasingly cold. 3 weeks ago, Michael texted our family group chat suggesting we gather for dinner while our parents were visiting Chicago for a weekend. They were staying with Michael and his family but had expressed interest in seeing all of us together. Stephanie immediately took control of the planning, suggesting an upscale restaurant called the Ivy that had recently opened to considerable acclaim. Let's do Saturday at 7, she wrote. I'll make the reservation. Mom and Dad deserve someplace special. I replied with a thumbs up emoji, already anticipating the tension but wanting to see my parents. Lucas offered to join me for moral support, but I declined. Something told me this needed to be just family. I'll be fine, I assured him, not knowing how wrong I would be. The Ivy was housed in a renovated historic building in downtown Chicago, its facade illuminated by subtle lighting that highlighted the original architectural details. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. The restaurant hummed with the quiet conversation of affluent diners and the gentle clink of fine china and crystal. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a navy blue dress I had designed with a client who worked in fashion. In my arms, I carried carefully wrapped gifts, a set of artisanal cooking oils for my mother who had recently taken cooking classes, a first edition of my father's favorite mystery author, a hand-knitted baby blanket for Michael's daughter, and even a pair of designer earrings I thought Stephanie might like. Gift-giving had always been my love language, a way to show my family I listened to and valued them even from a distance. My parents arrived next, both tanned from their Florida lifestyle. Mom hugged me tightly, exclaiming over my dress and how well I looked. Dad wrapped me in his signature bear hug, the familiar scent of his aftershave instantly transporting me back to childhood bedtime stories. There's our successful New Yorker, he beamed. Your mother and I were just looking at that magazine feature on your Central Park West project. Incredible work, sweetheart. Thanks, Dad, I smiled, genuinely warmed by his pride. Michael and Jessica arrived moments later, apologizing for being slightly late. Their babysitter had been delayed, they explained. I handed them the blanket for little Emma, which Jessica admired with sincere appreciation. Stephanie and Ryan were the last to arrive, 15 minutes after our reservation time. Stephanie wore an expensive-looking red dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled, diamonds glittering at her ears, the same designer I had coincidentally bought for her gift. Sorry we're late, she said, kissing our parents' cheeks but offering me only a brief nod. Traffic was a nightmare. The hostess led us to our table, a round one that should have comfortably seated 6 people. As we approached, I noticed Stephanie quickly maneuvering to ensure she sat between our parents, placing me directly across from her, beside Michael. It was a small thing, but so typical of her need to position herself as the favored daughter. After we settled in, a server approached to take our drink orders. Before anyone could speak, Stephanie interjected. We'll start with a bottle of the Opus 1 2015, she declared confidently. I recognized the wine as one that retailed for over $300. And perhaps the Dom Perignon to begin? We're celebrating family tonight. Our father raised his eyebrows slightly but didn't object. I caught Michael's eye, and he gave a small shrug as if to say, that's Stephanie for you. The sommelier appeared with the champagne, pouring 6 flutes with practiced precision. Stephanie raised her glass. To family, she said, her eyes moving past me as she smiled at our parents. To all our family, my father amended pointedly, his gaze including me in a way that Stephanie's had not. I felt a rush of gratitude for his subtle correction. As we studied the menus, I noted with growing concern that prices were significantly higher than I had anticipated. Main courses started at $75, with seafood towers and premium steak options reaching well into the hundreds. The seafood tower looks amazing, Stephanie commented, turning to Ryan. We should get that to start, don't you think? And perhaps the foie gras? Ryan nodded agreeably. Whatever you want, babe. I glanced at my mother, who was examining the menu with a slight furrow in her brow. Knowing my parents lived on a fixed retirement income now, I gently suggested, maybe we could share a few appetizers? The portions looked generous. Stephanie's smile tightened. Don't worry about it, Amber. Not all of us have to live on a budget. She turned to the server who had appeared at her elbow. We'll take the grand seafood tower, the foie gras, the truffle arancini, and the wagyu carpaccio to start. I felt my cheeks flush at her dismissive tone. My interior design business was actually doing quite well, but I had been raised to be mindful about unnecessary extravagance. Moreover, I was concerned about our parents' comfort with such excessive spending. As the appetizers arrived, an impressive array of luxury ingredients artfully arranged, Stephanie dominated the conversation, speaking primarily about her recent promotion and the exclusive neighborhood where she and Ryan were considering purchasing a second home. Trying to shift to a topic everyone could participate in, I said, remember those summer vacations we used to take to Lake Michigan? I was thinking about that little ice cream shop we loved the other day. Oh, that was before you came along, Amber, Stephanie replied coolly. That was a tradition from when we were a real family unit. A painful silence fell over the table. My mother quickly jumped in. Amber, tell us about that new client you mentioned, the one with the historic brownstone? I managed to share a few details about my current project, but Stephanie quickly redirected the conversation to her plans for redecorating her home. We're working with Carlisle Montgomery, she said, naming a designer known more for celebrity connections than actual talent. You probably haven't heard of him, Amber. He doesn't do those eco-friendly budget projects you focus on. His waiting list is over a year, but he made an exception for us. Each comment felt like a deliberate jab, designed to minimize my achievements and emphasize my separateness from the family. I noticed my father's increasingly furrowed brow and my mother's tight smile as they attempted to navigate Stephanie's behavior. Michael tried several times to include me in the conversation, asking about my latest travels and projects, but Stephanie continually interrupted or spoke over me. Ryan, either oblivious to the dynamics or complicit in them, focused primarily on ordering additional bottles of expensive wine. By the time the main courses arrived, elaborate plates featuring Japanese A5 wagyu, butter-poached lobster, and other premium offerings Stephanie had encouraged everyone to order, the tension at the table was palpable. I picked at my $65 pasta, appetite diminished by the growing knot in my stomach. It was when Stephanie began recounting childhood memories, stories deliberately chosen from times before my adoption, that I felt something inside me beginning to crack. Each anecdote reinforced a clear message: there was the original Wilson family, and then there was the family with me in it. According to Stephanie, they were not the same. The waiter cleared our plates and distributed dessert menus. Stephanie, now on her 4th glass of wine, seemed emboldened by alcohol and the tacit compliance of everyone at the table. Let's get one of everything for the table, she announced to the server without consulting anyone. And a round of those 30-year-old port wines. The table next to us had them, and they looked divine. I glanced at the dessert menu prices, each item ranging from $20 to $35, and the port at $75 per glass. The bill was rapidly accumulating to an alarming amount. Actually, I said quietly, I'm pretty full. Maybe we could just get a couple of things to share? Stephanie's eyes narrowed. Always counting pennies, aren't you, Amber? I guess that comes from your background. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Well, she waved her hand dismissively. Your people probably didn't have much. The table fell silent. Even Ryan looked uncomfortable. My people? I repeated, my heart pounding in my chest. You mean my biological parents that I never knew? Or do you mean the Wilsons, our parents, who raised me from age 3? Stephanie, my father warned, his voice low and serious. But Stephanie was past caution now. I'm just saying there's a difference between being born into a family and being brought in later. When mom and dad are gone, the Wilson inheritance will naturally stay with the bloodline. That's just how these things work. That is absolutely not how these things work in our family, my mother interjected, her voice shaking with anger. It's not like you're really family anyway, Stephanie continued as if our mother hadn't spoken. You've always been different from us. You don't look like us, you don't act like us. Even your career choice, interior design? No one in our family has ever been artistic. The restaurant seemed to grow quieter around us as nearby diners became aware of our conflict. A couple at the next table exchanged uncomfortable glances. The server hovering nearby discreetly stepped away. I fought to keep my voice steady. I have been part of this family for 25 years. Mom and Dad have always treated me as their daughter, because I am their daughter. A daughter they chose because they felt sorry for you, Stephanie snapped. Because your real parents didn't want you. I felt as though I'd been physically struck. Tears sprang to my eyes before I could control them. Stephanie, that's enough. Michael intervened, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. You're being cruel for no reason. I'm just stating facts, Stephanie replied, taking another sip of wine. If she can't handle the truth about her situation, that's not my problem. I wiped away a tear that had escaped despite my efforts. My situation, as you call it, is that I'm your sister. I have never done anything to deserve this kind of treatment from you. If you don't like it, go find another table, Stephanie said coldly. After all, you're not really a Wilson. The restaurant had grown so quiet I could hear the faint music from the speakers overhead. My mother gasped. My father's face had turned alarmingly red. Stephanie Wilson, he began, but I was already gathering my purse and wrap. It's okay, Dad, I said, though nothing felt okay at that moment. I think it's best if I leave. As I stood, Stephanie delivered her final blow. She signaled the server, who had been hovering awkwardly nearby, and requested the check. When it arrived, a leather-bound folder placed discreetly at the center of the table, Stephanie picked it up, glanced at it, and slid it directly in front of me. Since you're so successful in New York, she said with a cold smile, you can cover dinner. I opened the folder and felt my stomach drop. The bill totaled $3,270. Stephanie had circled the most expensive items, the premium wines she had ordered, the seafood tower, the specialty desserts that hadn't even arrived yet, and written Amber's share beside them. The sheer calculated malice of the gesture stunned me into silence. This hadn't been a spontaneous outburst, she had planned this humiliation from the beginning. Absolutely not, my father said, reaching for the bill. This is completely unacceptable, Stephanie. But the damage was done. With trembling hands, I gathered my belongings, somehow managed to say goodbye to my shocked parents and Michael, and walked out of the ivy with as much dignity as I could muster. Behind me, I could hear my father's raised voice confronting Stephanie, but I couldn't bear to stay another moment. Outside in the cool Chicago evening, I finally let the tears flow freely as I waited for my Uber to arrive. The 15-minute ride back to my hotel passed in a blur. I sat in the back seat, tissues clutched in my hand, trying to muffle my sobs so the driver wouldn't notice. My phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming texts and calls, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it yet. Once inside my hotel room, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the bed, finally allowing myself to fully break down. Years of accumulated hurt poured out in racking sobs that left me gasping for breath. The cruel words Stephanie had hurled at me played on repeat in my mind. You're not really family anyway, your real parents didn't want you, go find another table. After what felt like hours, I finally reached for my phone. There were 6 missed calls from my parents, 2 from Michael, and a dozen text messages. I opened Michael's first. "Amber, I'm so sorry about what happened. Stephanie was completely out of line. Dad paid the bill and read Steph the riot act. Please call when you can. Love you, sis." My parents' texts expressed similar sentiments: horror at Stephanie's behavior, assurances of their love, and pleas for me to call them. There was nothing from Stephanie, not that I expected an apology. I texted Michael briefly to let him know I was back at my hotel and would call tomorrow, then called Lucas. He answered on the first ring. "Amber? What's wrong? You sound like you've been crying." The concern in his voice brought fresh tears to my eyes. Between sobs, I recounted the evening's events. "I'm coming to Chicago," he said immediately. "I'll book a flight for tomorrow morning." "You don't have to do that," I protested weakly, though the thought of his comforting presence made me feel marginally better. "Yes, I do," he insisted. "You shouldn't be alone right now." After we hung up, I took a long, hot shower, trying to wash away the emotional residue of the evening. As I changed into pajamas, my phone rang again, my parents calling from their car. "Sweetheart," my mother's voice was thick with emotion. "We can't begin to tell you how sorry we are about what happened tonight." "It's not your fault," I said automatically. "In some ways, it is," my father replied, his voice coming through the speakerphone. "We should have addressed Stephanie's behavior years ago. We knew she struggled with your adoption at first, but we thought she'd outgrow it. Clearly, we were wrong." "What happened after I left?" I asked hesitantly. "I paid the bill," Dad said, anger evident in his tone. "And then I told Stephanie in no uncertain terms that her behavior was unacceptable and cruel. We left immediately after. We're headed back to Michael's house now. Your father and I will be flying back to New York with you tomorrow," Mom added. "We need to have a proper family discussion about this." I felt a wave of exhaustion at the thought of more family drama. "I appreciate that, but I think I need some space right now. Lucas is flying in tomorrow, and honestly, I just want to spend time with him before heading home." There was a pause before my mother responded. "We understand, sweetheart. Just know that we love you. You are our daughter in every way that matters." After hanging up, I checked my social media accounts out of habit and immediately wished I hadn't. Stephanie had posted a vague status update: "Sad when someone shows their true colors and ruins a special family dinner. Some people just can't handle the truth." Several of her friends had commented with supportive messages, having no idea of the actual context. More disturbingly, she had apparently been texting our extended family members, including our aunts and cousins, giving them her twisted version of events. I discovered this when my cousin Rachel messaged me. "Hey Amber, is everything okay? Stephanie says you had some kind of breakdown at dinner and stuck everyone with a huge bill before storming out? That doesn't sound like you at all." I didn't have the emotional energy to respond or correct the narrative. Instead, I turned off my phone, took the sleeping pill I kept for occasional insomnia, and fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, I woke to a gentle knock at my hotel room door. Through the peephole, I saw Lucas standing in the hallway, his kind face drawn with concern. I flung open the door and collapsed into his arms. "You came early," I mumbled into his shoulder. "I caught the red eye," he explained, holding me tightly. "Couldn't wait until morning." Over room service breakfast, I filled Lucas in on the additional details and showed him the text messages that had continued to arrive overnight. Michael had sent a lengthier apology and reported that Stephanie was unrepentant, insisting she had only spoken the truth that everyone else was too afraid to say. "What are you going to do about the money?" Lucas asked carefully. "Your dad paid it, but are you going to offer to reimburse him?" I had been wrestling with this question all night. On one hand, I didn't want to appear petty about money. On the other, paying would feel like accepting Stephanie's manipulation. "I think I shouldn't," I said finally. Dad chose to pay it, and offering money now would just reinforce Stephanie's narrative that I walked out on the bill. Lucas nodded. I agree. And what about the larger issue? Where do you go from here with your family? I pushed my barely touched toast away. I honestly don't know. I've spent my entire life trying to be accepted by Stephanie, trying to be the perfect daughter and sister to earn my place in the family. Maybe it's time to stop trying. That sounds healthy, Lucas said, reaching across the table to take my hand. You don't have to cut everyone off, but some distance from Stephanie seems necessary. Over the next few days, I maintained minimal contact with my family while processing my emotions. I texted daily with my parents and Michael but kept the conversations brief and avoided discussing Stephanie. Lucas and I spent the weekend exploring Chicago, creating a buffer of positive experiences before returning to New York. Back home, I scheduled an appointment with a therapist who specialized in adoption and family trauma. Dr. Levine helped me understand that my yearning for Stephanie's acceptance was deeply rooted in adoption-related insecurities, the fear of abandonment, the need to prove my worthiness of love, the sense that my place in the family was conditional rather than guaranteed. Your sister's rejection touches on your deepest fears, Dr. Levine explained during our second session. But her behavior says more about her than it does about you. Some siblings, especially those who were young when an adoption occurred, develop complex feelings of displacement and jealousy that can last well into adulthood if not properly addressed. This perspective helped me view the situation with more emotional distance. Stephanie's cruelty stemmed from her own unresolved issues, not from any inherent unworthiness on my part. Meanwhile, the family fallout continued. My parents canceled the remainder of their Chicago visit and returned to Florida earlier than planned. My mother called to inform me that they had decided not to see Stephanie before leaving. We needed time to think about everything, she explained. Your father and I have been doing a lot of soul-searching about how we handled things over the years. Michael reported that Stephanie was furious about being abandoned by our parents and was blaming me for turning everyone against her. She had escalated her campaign on social media, posting thinly veiled comments about toxic people who tear families apart and the importance of blood connections. 2 weeks after the disastrous dinner, I felt strong enough to make some decisions about moving forward. I would maintain relationships with my parents and Michael but establish clear boundaries regarding Stephanie. I would no longer attend events where she controlled the narrative or set the terms. I would correct misrepresentations of me to extended family but without engaging in a smear campaign of my own. Most importantly, I would stop seeking validation from someone who was fundamentally incapable of providing it. 2 weeks after I returned to New York, my parents called with unexpected news. We've decided to fly back to Chicago, my mother announced. We need to address this situation directly, as a family. Michael has offered to host everyone at his house this Saturday. We'd like you to come, Amber. My stomach tightened with anxiety. Will Stephanie be there? Yes, my father replied. We've insisted she attend. This has gone on long enough. I hesitated, picturing another disastrous confrontation. I don't know, Dad. After what happened last time. We understand your concerns, my mother interjected. But we won't let things get out of hand again. Your father and I have done a lot of thinking, and we realize we've enabled Stephanie's behavior for far too long. It's time for some hard truths to be spoken. After discussing it with Lucas and Dr. Levine, I reluctantly agreed to fly to Chicago for the weekend. Lucas offered to come with me, but I decided this was something I needed to face on my own. You've got this, he said, kissing me goodbye at the airport. Remember, you have nothing to prove to anyone. Saturday afternoon found me walking up the path to Michael's suburban home, my heart pounding with apprehension. Michael opened the door before I could ring the bell. They're all here, he whispered, giving me a quick hug. Stephanie's been crying on and off all morning. I think she expected Mom and Dad to take her side once they had time to come to their senses. I nodded, taking a deep breath before following him into the living room. My parents sat together on the sofa, their expressions solemn. Stephanie and Ryan occupied the love seat across from them. Stephanie's eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect makeup smudged. Ryan looked uncomfortable, his gaze fixed on the floor. Amber's here, Michael announced unnecessarily. My mother immediately stood and embraced me. My father followed suit. Stephanie remained seated, eyes narrowed as she watched our interaction. Well, my father said after we were all seated, Michael having brought in an extra chair from the dining room for me. I think we all know why we're here. Yes, Stephanie interjected, her voice trembling with what sounded like rehearsed emotion. We're here because Amber has finally shown everyone her true colors. After everything this family has done for her. Stop right there, my father interrupted, his tone sharper than I'd ever heard it. That is exactly the kind of manipulative statement that we're here to address. Stephanie's mouth fell open in shock. She had clearly expected to control the narrative. For 25 years, my mother continued, we've watched you undermine, exclude, and belittle your sister. We've made excuses for your behavior, telling ourselves you just needed time to adjust, that you'd grow out of it, that sibling rivalry was normal. But what happened at the Ivy crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. You're taking her side? Stephanie gasped, tears immediately springing to her eyes. After she embarrassed us in public and walked out on dinner? That's not what happened, and you know it, Michael said firmly. I was there, Steph. We all were. You deliberately humiliated Amber and then tried to stick her with a $3,000 bill that you were primarily responsible for. Stephanie turned to Ryan for support, but he shifted uncomfortably. Babe, maybe you should just listen for a minute, he suggested quietly. Throughout this exchange, I remained silent, watching the dynamic unfold with a strange sense of detachment. For perhaps the first time, I wasn't anxiously trying to smooth things over or make myself smaller to accommodate Stephanie's feelings. When everyone looked at me expectantly, I took a deep breath and spoke calmly. I've spent most of my life trying to earn your acceptance, Stephanie. Trying to prove I deserve to be part of this family. I now realize that was never going to happen because your issue isn't really with me, it's with Mom and Dad's decision to adopt me. A decision you had no control over as a 7-year-old. Stephanie scoffed, but I continued. I understand that must have been difficult for you as a child. Suddenly having to share your parents' attention with a new sister wasn't what you wanted. But we're adults now. Your continued resentment isn't about me, it's about your own unresolved feelings. Don't psychoanalyze me, Stephanie snapped. You have no idea what it was like. They brought you home and suddenly everything was about Amber. Amber needs extra attention. Amber needs special help adjusting. Amber gets special art classes. Amber gets a fancy scholarship. That's not true, Stephanie, my mother said firmly. We never favored Amber. In fact, looking back, we probably overcompensated in your direction because we were so concerned about you feeling displaced. We spent just as much on your education, your activities, your wedding, my father added. We've always treated all 3 of our children equally. But she's not your child. Stephanie exclaimed, her composure finally breaking. She's someone else's child that you decided to take in. Why wasn't our family enough for you? Why did you need to bring in an outsider? The raw pain in her voice was startling. For the first time, I glimpsed the wounded child beneath the hostile adult. Our decision to adopt Amber wasn't about you not being enough, my mother said gently. It was about having enough love to share with another child who needed a family. And Amber is our child, my father added firmly. Just as much as you and Michael are. Family isn't defined by blood, Stephanie. It's defined by love, commitment, and choice. Michael, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Steph, do you remember when I broke my arm in 6th grade? Who stayed up all night with me because I was in too much pain to sleep? It was Amber. She was 9 years old, reading me comic books until dawn because she didn't want me to be alone. Stephanie didn't respond, but I noticed her chin quiver slightly. Or when you had that horrible breakup with Todd in college, Michael continued. Who drove 3 hours to bring you ice cream and watch sad movies with you? Amber did, even though you'd barely spoken to her all semester. That's different, Stephanie muttered. How? Michael challenged. How is that different from what siblings do for each other? Ryan, who had been silently taking everything in, suddenly spoke. "Stephanie, I need to say something." He turned to the rest of us. "I had no idea about the bill. Stephanie told me her plan was to treat everyone to dinner to show off our success. I didn't know she was planning to do what she did." Stephanie stared at him in betrayal, but Ryan continued. "I've watched how you treat Amber for years, and I've never understood it. I grew up with step-siblings and half-siblings. Our family was a mix of yours, mine, and ours, and we never thought twice about it. Family is family." "I can't believe you're all ganging up on me like this," Stephanie said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm the victim here." "No, you're not," my father said, his voice gentle but firm. "And until you can recognize that, I'm afraid there will be consequences. Your mother and I have decided that until you acknowledge the hurt you've caused and make a genuine effort to change, we'll be limiting our contact with you." Stephanie's face drained of color. "What does that mean?" "It means we won't be attending events where Amber isn't equally welcomed," my mother explained. "It means we expect a sincere apology and changed behavior before things can return to normal. And," my father added, "we expect you to reimburse us for the dinner bill, which we've calculated you were responsible for 80% of, given your ordering choices." Stephanie looked around the room, seemingly searching for an ally and finding none. With a choked sob, she grabbed her purse and rushed from the room. Ryan hesitated, looking torn. "I'm sorry," he said to all of us. "I'll talk to her when she's calmer." Then he followed his wife out the door. After they left, a heavy silence fell over the room. Michael was the first to break it. "Well, that went about as expected." Despite everything, I felt a surprising sense of peace. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my truth without apologizing for my existence, and my family had stood firmly beside me. My father came to sit next to me, taking my hand in his. "I'm so sorry, Amber. We should have addressed this years ago." "It's not your fault," I said, meaning it this time. "You did your best." "Our best wasn't good enough," my mother said, wiping away tears. "But we're going to do better from now on." Later that evening, as we shared pizza and wine at Michael's kitchen table, I felt a shift in our family dynamic. Michael seemed more relaxed, offering stories and jokes without the tension of mediating between Stephanie and me. My parents spoke openly about their feelings regarding the adoption, sharing details they had never mentioned before. "We fell in love with you the moment we saw you," my mother revealed, her eyes shining with emotion. "You were this tiny, serious little girl clutching that worn rabbit toy, and I just knew you were meant to be our daughter." "We never regretted our decision for a single moment," my father added. "Not once in 25 years. As Michael drove me back to my hotel, he said something that resonated deeply. "You know, when we were kids, I always thought you were the brave one. Stephanie and I were born into this family, we didn't have to earn our place. But you navigated everything with such grace, even when Steph was at her worst. I've always admired that about you." His words settled something inside me that had been restless for as long as I could remember. I may not have been born a Wilson, but I had earned my place in this family through love, resilience, and character. And no one, not even Stephanie, could take that away from me. 6 months have passed since the confrontation at Michael's house, and much has changed in our family landscape. The journey hasn't been linear or easy, but it has been transformative in ways I never expected. After the initial family meeting, Stephanie went through a period of angry silence, refusing contact with any of us for nearly a month. Eventually, she reached out to our parents, though her communication remained defensive and focused primarily on her feelings of betrayal rather than acknowledging her harmful behavior. My weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Levine provided crucial support as I navigated these changes. Rather than focusing exclusively on Stephanie's treatment of me, we worked on my own patterns, the people-pleasing tendencies, the deeply ingrained need to prove my worthiness, the fear of rejection that had shaped so many of my choices. Adoption creates a unique set of challenges, Dr. Levine explained during one particularly insightful session. Children who are adopted often develop an earned belonging mindset, the subconscious belief that they must continuously prove their worth to maintain their place in the family. This framework helped me understand my lifelong drive for perfection and achievement. While these traits had served me well professionally, they had also kept me locked in unhealthy relationship patterns where I valued others' approval over my own needs and boundaries. My relationship with my parents deepened significantly during this period. Free from the constant stress of managing Stephanie's behavior and my reactions, we developed a more authentic connection. They visited New York monthly, and I discovered a newfound joy in their company without the shadow of family tension hanging over us. During their third visit, over dinner at my apartment, my father broached a subject that clearly had been weighing on him. "We've been doing some estate planning," he said, somewhat hesitantly. "And we wanted you to know that we've established equal trusts for all three of our children. Regardless of what Stephanie said about bloodlines, you will receive exactly the same inheritance as your siblings." "Dad, you don't have to," I began. "Yes, we do," my mother interjected firmly. "Not because you need the money, you've built a successful business on your own, but because it's what we've always intended. You are our daughter in every sense of the word." Rather than feeling validated by this gesture, as I might have in the past, I felt a gentle sadness that my parents felt such reassurance was necessary. They had already given me something far more valuable than money: a loving home, unwavering support, and the foundation to become the person I am today. A portion of my trust, once established, I immediately designated for a newly created scholarship fund for adopted children pursuing creative careers. The Wilson Adoption Foundation became my way of transforming past pain into future opportunity for others with similar backgrounds. My relationship with Michael and his family flourished without Stephanie's divisive presence. I became a regular visitor to their home, developing a special bond with my niece Emma, who at 5 years old showed early signs of artistic talent that delighted me. Teaching her to mix watercolors and create simple designs became our special ritual whenever I visited. "She talks about Aunt Amber all week after you leave," Jessica confided during one visit. "You've become her hero." The idea that I could be a positive influence in Emma's life, that Aunt Amber was a title of love and admiration rather than an awkward designation, filled me with quiet joy. Stephanie eventually reached out to me directly, though her message fell short of a genuine apology. "I still think everyone overreacted to what happened at dinner," she wrote in a carefully worded email. "But I'm willing to move forward for the sake of the family." Rather than engaging in a debate or accepting this non-apology, I simply responded, "I appreciate you reaching out. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship when you're ready to acknowledge the impact of your words and actions. Until then, I'll be keeping some distance for my own well-being." Setting this boundary, clearly, calmly, without anger or justification, represented profound growth for me. The old Amber would have immediately accepted any crumb of connection Stephanie offered, regardless of the cost to my self-respect. Thanksgiving approached, the first major holiday since our family rupture. My parents decided to host at their Florida home, expressly inviting me while informing Stephanie that her invitation was conditional on changed behavior. She opted not to attend, citing prior commitments. The holiday that had always been fraught with tension became a relaxed, joyful gathering. Michael, Jessica, and Emma flew down from Chicago. Lucas joined us as well, having become a beloved figure in my family over the previous months. Without the cloud of Stephanie's hostility, we laughed more freely, shared more openly, and connected more deeply than I could remember doing at any family gathering. After dinner, as we watched Emma chase lizards in the backyard, Lucas pulled me aside to a quiet spot near my parents' garden. There, under a trellis draped with bougainvillea, he knelt on one knee and opened a small velvet box. "Amber Wilson," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion, "this past year has shown me what real strength and grace look like. I've watched you transform pain into growth, set healthy boundaries without bitterness, and remain open-hearted despite difficulty. I'd be honored to build a family with you, one based on choice, respect, and love rather than obligation or blood. Will you marry me?" Through happy tears, I said yes. As Lucas slipped the ring onto my finger. A vintage emerald surrounded by small diamonds that he had chosen, knowing my preference for unique design over traditional solitaires. I felt a sense of rightness that transcended the tumult of recent months. Later that evening, sharing our news with my family, I was struck by the pure joy in my parents' reaction. There was no reservation, no holding back, just complete, unconditional happiness for my happiness. "Lucas," my father said, embracing my fiancé warmly, "welcome to the family, officially." "Though you felt like family from the moment we met you," my mother added, wiping away tears. As we celebrated with champagne on the patio under the Florida stars, I reflected on how profoundly my understanding of family had evolved. Family wasn't defined by DNA or legal documents, though these could be components. True family was defined by consistent love, mutual respect, and the daily choice to show up for one another through life's complexities. In January, I began volunteering at an adoption support center in Manhattan, offering art workshops for adopted children and teens. Watching these young people express through color and form what they sometimes struggled to articulate in words reminded me of my own childhood and the healing power of creative expression. During one session, I met Lily, a 12-year-old girl recently adopted after years in foster care. Quiet and watchful, she reminded me powerfully of myself at that age. "People always ask me if I want to find my real parents," she confided as she worked on a collage. "I don't know how to tell them that my adoptive parents are my real parents." "You just did," I told her with a smile. "And you're absolutely right." As spring approached, bringing with it final preparations for our September wedding, Lucas and I had many conversations about our future family. Having both witnessed dysfunctional family dynamics, his parents' bitter divorce and my experience with Stephanie, we were committed to creating something different. "I think adoption should be part of our family plan," Lucas said one evening as we discussed children. "Not instead of having biological kids if that's possible for us, but alongside it. There are so many children who need homes." His words touched me deeply, not because he was trying to honor my background, but because he genuinely shared my values about what constitutes family. Stephanie and I maintained our distance, though Michael kept me updated on her life. She and Ryan were expecting their first child, a development that seemed to be softening some of her harder edges. I sent a carefully chosen baby gift, a set of classic children's books and a small stuffed rabbit similar to the one I had carried with me to the Wilsons' home 25 years earlier. The accompanying card simply read, "Wishing your growing family all the best. Love, Amber." The gift was acknowledged with a brief but polite thank you note. A small step, perhaps, but a step nonetheless. As I sit here today, reflecting on the journey that began with that devastating dinner at the Ivy, I'm struck by how a moment that seemed to confirm my deepest fears, that I didn't truly belong, that my place in the family was conditional and tenuous, ultimately led to the opposite realization. The painful severing of unhealthy dynamics created space for authentic connection based not on desperate people-pleasing or earned worthiness, but on mutual respect and genuine love. I no longer wonder if I belong. I know I do, not because I've proven myself deserving, but because belonging isn't something you earn. It's something you claim through the courage to be authentically yourself and the wisdom to recognize those who love you for exactly who you are. The $3,270 bill that Stephanie tried to use as a weapon of exclusion ultimately became the price of my freedom from seeking her validation. In that sense, it may have been the best money never spent. What about you? Has someone ever made you feel like you didn't belong? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more authentic conversations about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding your place in the world. Remember, the family you create, whether by birth, adoption, or choice, is just as real and valuable as any other. Thank you for being part of my extended family today.